Okay, now this is a subject that I've been asked many times over the AV series of why we don't have a presentation on geoengineering and weather modification. And so last year I did actually include it on the agenda. But the particular individual that I had invited to come along and present did actually arrive here, but then he had a problem with somebody who was in the audience. And he basically decided that he wasn't going to present. And so despite my protracted discussions with him, and despite the fact I encouraged him to sleep on it, the next morning I basically got a text message to say that thanks very much, but he'd gone. Interestingly, he's pretty much disappeared from the scene since that point. But I am very pleased to be able to say that we've got the issue on the agenda this year. And it's a subject that I think that can be very divisive. It can be as it is as divisive as climate change. Because if we look at the anti-fracking community, which is a very, very broad church, it's a complete cross-section from right across the social, the political, the philosophical, the religious spectrum. And obviously, perceive the geoengineering and weather modification agenda. And what is very interesting for me is that the deeper that somebody believes in the Al Gore version of climate change, the more they deny weather modification and geoengineering, despite the enormous numbers of patents on exactly those issues. So it's a very, very divisive issue. But it's, one of the things that we absolutely have to embrace in the interests of epistemological integrity is that, we have to be prepared to acknowledge that we're not going to necessarily agree on everything. And in fact, we have to, if we're going to do what it is that we're trying to achieve, we have to be big enough and mature enough and humane enough to recognize that it's okay to disagree. It's absolutely okay to disagree. That's part of what being human is all about. And sadly, what's been created, especially with the online culture, is that unless somebody agrees with everything that you agree with, then they're the mortal enemy. And we've got to step away from that. It's okay to disagree. I mean, there's one or two subjects that Matt and I don't even mention. Do we? Because we know we have differences of opinion. But does that affect, the way in which we work together? Of course not. Of course not. So whatever your point of view, whatever your perspective, the important thing is to keep an open mind. And so I'm really looking forward to what our next speaker has to say. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Olga Raffa.
Great. I just want to say, is the theme of this AV6 is power to the people. And I want to thank Ian so much for inviting me to talk. It's geoengineering. What's going on in the sky these days is a very big issue, obviously. It is a global phenomena, and it covers everything. So it's a very big subject. But it's not actually being addressed very well in this country in regards to talks and information that's getting out there. There's a lot online. And as regards to what happened last year, there were some activists doing some talks around the country, which was really good, and there was some definite activism coming together. But then there was a kind of a lull, and not many people have gotten up and spoken about this in this country. Like I said, a lot online, and there is a lot of information out there. So just to let you know a little bit about myself, a single mum, just love the countryside and all good things, natural and wonderful. And one day, I looked up in the sky and I just saw something that was not there when I was growing up and into my 30s and my 40s. And all of a sudden I saw a phenomena that I had heard a word called chemtrails on alternative media when I was living for 20 years in America. I moved to America because in '85, there was a winter that was so long, and I didn't see the sun once. It was just a completely cloud-covered month. And I did see one ray of sunshine when I was in a park one day, and I quickly went over to see if I could catch it, but it disappeared. And funnily enough, that's kind of when what we're seeing in the sky started to happen. It was in the mid to late '80s. And so, but I knew there was sun shining in other parts of the world, so I moved to Southern California, had a great time for 20 years. And as time went on, 911 happened there. And so I was listening to what I thought was alternative media, but it was just not the serious mainstream. When I got into looking into this subject, I went into, well, you know, all the rabbit holes that we go down once we start to awaken. And so the phenomena that's happening is, you know, it's very sad, but in a way there is a blessing in there. In that, for me, it seriously woke me up to the deeper program that's going on of control and where the world, you know, where the power is that's taking us down some very dark places. So in a way, it is an awakening tool. So I hope I can walk you through this. And then what happened was, just to go on with my story a little bit, was so I started looking into it. And the word chemtrails I had heard like 10 years previously. But I had seen a trail in the sky, and I go, oh yeah, so that's what chemtrails is. But I didn't know what it meant. And literally 10 years later, I came back to England. And then I saw this phenomenon in the sky. It was one of those days where there are trails all over the sky, and there's no reason for it. Never used to happen. And so I looked into it, and I found that there was a lot of information out there, but it's hard to distinguish, you know, what's, you know, when you start talking about it, you want to try and prove it. So I decided to do some rainwater tests, and we started a website called Chemtrails Project UK, based on John White, who was doing some work in the States, doing rainwater tests, because I was asking him where I could find some rainwater tests. So it did occur that, in the end, there is a lot of heavy metals in our rainwater. And he encouraged me to put a website up, and so I went ahead with that. And then I wanted to, well, just go along the mainstream route to my MPs and government and say, what is this? We need to look into this. So I wrote a long letter that turned into what's now called the Directive to ban geoengineering and aerosol spraying in the UK. And 140 MPs have now received this document, which I encourage you to look at and read and use. On the website, we have a widget where you can send it to your MP. What we hope to have provided is a kind of a non-wriggle out document that really makes all the points and the reason why we need to have it banned and investigate. So I'll go into that at the end. So, like I said, it's a really big subject, so it's a very linear PowerPoint, but what's going to happen is the information will come up and crisscross as they go along, so I'll just carry on starting. But I wanted to mention also the reason why I'm here and the reason why I haven't given this up, because it's difficult, because it's not recognized by any governments as a problem. So it's a bit of a brain strain, because you have to keep going, even though governments are denying it. So, but what's encouraging is that Pippa, who spoke yesterday, she's my inspiration, because what she did was work with the FOIAs, and she worked for 7 years on those FOIAs to get the facts that she went to debate in Parliament and had a law passed. Now, this is what we're here for, is we need to get out and really, it's kind of like another phenomena that's happening is the ancient Indian Vedas talk about Kali Yuga. Okay, so we're coming out of a dark age and we are moving into a golden age. And it's the Iron Age that we're coming out of. And so we're almost like through this birth canal, and that's how this feels to me, because it's very difficult. But it's like we have to push now. And what Pippa has done is to pass a law. We all have to be actively, I do believe, in order to come up against what we're being faced, use the system that we have. And I think that's what's going to have to happen here with the geoengineering, is it's being talked about and being proposed, but what's happening is we're seeing exactly the same thing that they're proposing happening in the sky. So my effort is to eventually take this to Parliament, to pass a law, and bring this into mainstream conversation, because it's not being discussed in the mainstream. So I'll just begin here and go into a little bit of history of weather control, and that the clouds we're seeing, I feel that we're being deceived, and so we're hoping to push back with our directive and other ways. So, like I said, this is the first time I've gotten up and talked, and but this is the kind of phenomena that happens on a particular day. So I work a lot on the website and on Facebook, and people send me a lot of photographs that they're seeing of phenomena in the sky. And so this happened on the 12th of April, just recently. These are pictures from all over the UK, and some people think it's normal jet emissions. Other people think this is not normal, especially like the grids, the noughts and crosses, and the squiggles. They just, to me, don't seem like normal pathways. So, and as one of the talkers were describing, you know, this net with this fish in this net, this is almost like, this is the visible net here that I think we're seeing in the skies. I'm in like some parallel universe. What's going on? So that's what I'm saying. That's that wake up when, you know, when someone starts to look into this, what is going on? So you come up against this whole chemtrail, contrail situation. There's a definition, you know, in the dictionary, a visible trail left in the sky by an aircraft believed by some to consist of chemical, biological agents released as part of a covert operation. And then they're described as persistent contrails, which this author who wrote A New Manhattan Project describes it as an oxymoron, because it does confuse things, because contrails do not persist, but chemtrails do. And what's to me, the simple definition, or the simple difference, is that, we'll go into it obviously, you know, clouds come from the evaporation of the atmosphere, and they attach to particulates of dust, and then these fall down as rain. But the thing is, what the government says when you write to them and say, what is this? They say they're persistent contrails that are essentially ice crystal. But, you know, the difference between a contrail being an ice crystal is different, because when they do persist and they form into clouds and actually change the weather very visibly, very quickly, you know, this isn't ice crystal. This is particulate matter, because the clouds, the condensation attaches to particulate matter. So we'll just carry on into that. So then, well, first of all, obviously, we'll look at what's coming out of the back of the planes, the jet fuel. Jim Lee is a researcher. As I go through, I'll be mentioning a lot of the activists, because obviously the work I've done is on the backs of a lot of work that a lot of activists have done. So Climate Viewer is a great website to go to. He's got a good documentation of everything. So in fact, you look into the jet fuel, they've advanced from JP1 to JP8. There is a trade secret ingredient in there, and that's 25% of the fuel. And it has been found that within these ingredients, there is barium and calcium and other ingredients in there. And that, in fact, a form of aluminium has been added to the jet fuel over the years. That one over there, I'm not going to attempt to say it, because I'll probably say it wrong. But it's a form of aluminium. So there is aluminium being put into the atmosphere by by normal exhaust already. So let's see. So we'll just, the definition of a cloud again. Again, this is a slow process. The water evaporates from the oceans, the trees, the land in general, but it's slow and it comes up and the condensation attaches to the nuclei, like I said, which then rain down. There was a study done by this guy, Daniel Rosenfeld, who showed that the air pollution actually stops rain. So then you also have a lot of, you could say, geoengineering by just our power plants and industry. But a lot of the power plants are actually 100 years old, so a lot of our energy is being made by the old power system that is the steam coming out. So you burn the coal and the steam comes out, and that's just water vapor. But there are thousands of these all over the planet. China's a very big one for it. We have about 16. America has about possibly, 7,000, possibly 12,000, something like that. There's just a lot. And so, but the thing about this is that the moisture that's going up into the atmosphere is very quick. So over 50 years, and this whole process, which is, ancient technology, considering the technology we have, it is actually changing the weather in that all this moisture is going up. And that study that showed that air pollution stops rain is because the man-made pollution is very, very tiny particulates, and what it does is the moisture can't attach to it. And so it actually makes a haze instead of a cloud. And then, so as we'll go into it, you'll see how the technologies that we now have are then affecting those particulate matters, especially when it comes to heavy metals. So climate scientists are studying and have been studying geoengineering the weather for many, many years, and there's a lot of money being put into universities to study this. So this is Jasper Kirkby, who has been looking at, he did a cloud project, and he said these are clouds seeded by jets dumping aerosols into the upper atmosphere. So he's distinguishing a jet trail he's not saying they're contrails, he's saying these are jets dumping aerosols, just to make that point. And here he talks about it.
Jasper Kirby is a particle physicist, currently engaged with cloud physics research at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. In an article published in the journal Nature, Kirby reports that cosmic rays, quote, seem to enhance the production of nanometer-sized particles from the gaseous atmosphere by more than a factor of 10, unquote. He added, however, that the particles in question are far too small to serve as cloud condensation nuclei. This important excerpt from Dr. Kirby's 2009 presentation makes it clear that IPCC climate scientists are fully aware that jet aircraft are dumping aerosols into the atmosphere with the effect of deliberate climate warming.
There's plenty of evidence that large regions of the climate are lacking sufficient aerosol to form clouds. Contrails are a well-known example of that. These are not smoke trails. These are clouds which are seeded by jets dumping aerosols into the upper atmosphere. These are clouds which are seeded by jets dumping aerosols into the upper atmosphere.
But if there was a conspiracy to use jet-produced clouds to cool the atmosphere, would it work? No.
The contrails that are spreading that you can identify as contrails, those would tend to warm the atmosphere. Everything that we know about would say that. The contrails that are spreading that you can identify as contrails, those would tend to warm the atmosphere. Everything that we know about would say that.
Dr. Pinner's statement is not taken lightly by climate scientists. Her comments echo the 1999 climate change publication titled IPCC Special Report on Aviation and the Global Atmosphere. On page 17, the quote, "Contrails tend to warm the Earth's surface, similar to thin, high clouds," unquote. So, jet aircraft are dumping chemical aerosols high in the atmosphere to create artificial contrails that spread into thin, high, artificial clouds that your TV meteorologist has been told to misrepresent by telling the public they're only ice crystals. Dr. Kirby's almost too casual comment confirming that jet aircraft are dumping aerosols into the atmosphere reveals that this covert geoengineering and chemtrail operation is well known by government agencies like NASA, NOAA, and the FAA, the IPCC climate scientists being paid to churn out climate change propaganda, and geoengineers like David Keith, Ken Caldera, and their boss, Bill Gates. The public needs to demonstrate their outrage at this massive conspiracy of government secrecy that allows these toxins and bioweapons to rain down on global populations with impunity. We've had enough.
So that's thanks to Harold Say from Chemtrails Planet, another great resource to look into if you want to do your own research. And another activist, Max Bliss, took this photo on his travels just to show that, you know, these are the real cloud formations that we were used to. In the 1992 Cambridge Encyclopedia, there's 9 formations as opposed to the 30 cloud types that we're shown today in NASA charts. And, you know, so how far behind was science, you know, in 1992? All of a sudden, we've got 30 clouds. And so, no doubt, this has been generated by, well, you know, what we're seeing in the atmosphere happening. So, some very strange-looking clouds and very complicated silly names, some of them, but so that's from NASA. And then the Met Office has these new definitions, you know, mammatus, arcus clouds, and the undulatus aspiratus, which is, let's see, this one here, which is, you know, what I would call chem fog. You know, when it's been, you've had a couple of really heavy days, and all of a sudden, in comes this very thick fog, and I've gotten sick from it, and people do get sick from it. Highly recommend you stay indoors on those days. But yeah, this one, they're just very, very odd-looking clouds that never used to exist before. But the Met Office has done some climate engineering research, and so they are, now the Met Office is now an executive agency and trading fund of the Department for Business and Innovation Skills. And so their results indicate that so-called spreading contrails cause an order of magnitude more climate warming than the line-shaped contrails alone, and are the largest single climate forcing agent associated with aviation. So it's not too easy to see here, but here you have these circular contrails that many people will take photos of, and you'll see these circles in the sky, what's going on. And so this is over about 9 hours. During the day, they slowly spread out and make cloud. So this is another photo from the Met Office. This is the first page when you Google clouds and the Met Office comes up. But if you look at that photograph, to me, those are not natural clouds. Those are the clouds that we see that have been put up there by the trails, and they fall out and spread out. And so it's very, I feel it's very deceptive that they're now putting the artificial, the man-made clouds as clouds that they don't distinguish between natural and man-made clouds. And I think that's wrong of them to do. So whether solution or whether catastrophe, is there a hidden agenda behind geoengineering? Well, there's a lot of science out there, a lot of books, especially this one, A Case for Climate Engineering by David Keith. We'll hear about him a little later on. So, so geoengineering is supposed to mitigate these catastrophes, but when we look into it, are they actually causing them? So this is the definition. Climate engineering, also referred to as geoengineering, is deliberate and large-scale intervention of the Earth's climatic system with the aim of reducing global warming. Climate engineering has two categories of technologies: carbon dioxide removal and solar radiation management. Carbon dioxide removal addresses the cause of climate change by removing one of the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Solar radiation management attempts to offset effects of greenhouse gases by causing the Earth to absorb less solar radiation. And there should be a video of David Keith in one of the climate conferences talking about one of the proposals for geoengineering, which is, he'll explain, putting nanoparticulates of aluminium into the atmosphere.
There's no question that large-scale climate engineering is untested and dangerous. We've mostly thought about sulfur, and there's a lot of good reasons to think about sulfur, because sulfur is what nature does, and there are very good reasons to think we would like to start very slowly if we ever wanted to do this, and do something that was an analog to nature, because we have some idea what the downsides of what nature does are. Nevertheless, there might be some good reasons to think about alumina. It turns out, first of all, there's been a lot of work on the environmental consequences of alumina in the stratosphere because it's in shuttle exhausts. There's a bunch of papers that look at the radiative and ozone-destroying properties of alumina in the stratosphere, and those make you think it might be useful. The big deal really is that alumina has 4 times the volumetric radiative forcing for small particles as does sulfur, and that means you have 4 times less surface area for the same radiative forcing. And this is a much bigger deal. You have roughly 16 times less the coagulation rate, and that's the thing that really drives removal. So you could get away, we think, with much smaller mass fluxes, but we haven't run those studies yet, so that might be wrong. The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality alumina particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. So it's certainly in principle possible to do that. There's a big literature that's already looked at that. Look at the alumina or sulfuric acid functions, which are the mass-specific backscatter, so a measure of radiative forcing, and in fact I have it in watts per square meter per megaton. And those things fall off as the particles get larger, but even more important, the fall speed rises quite rapidly in this regime. And so as particles stick together and get large, they fall out of the stratosphere very quickly. And so particles that are too large are much less effective per unit mass.
If I could just clarify, so 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere would have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. Work to separate out the toxicological. Well, so the alumina, we've only begun to research and published nothing. We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at. Aerosol geoengineering looks like it is so cheap that the cost is basically not going to be an issue. That means that implementation decisions will be risk-to-risk decisions. The risk of doing it against the risk of not doing it. And it makes the problem of how we govern it fundamentally harder and different and novel. Another reason why I think more knowledge is good is I think this will turn out to be more complicated and harder to do than we now think. So I've told you that it's cheap to deliver materials to the stratosphere, and I'm convinced that's true. I don't think that will change. But I think the more we do research, the less easy this will look, the more complicated the environmental effects will look, and that's a good thing, because right now it looks too easy. So I think that if we do more research, we're likely to find out that it's harder and more complicated than we thought, and that the side effects are harder to manage, and that's a healthy outcome that will make it easier to do the management. It's an empirical question, how people will actually react to knowledge about this. Another reaction is to say, if these crazy scientists are so concerned about putting CO2 in the atmosphere, they want to think about these things, then that might actually mean we should be more serious about the risks of CO2 in the atmosphere. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids.
It's more like free riding on our grandkids.
The lady who helped me with this PowerPoint also put a great banner together that we use in our demos with that quote. And when he came out of the climate conference in Cambridge not so long ago, he denied saying that. But he took a photo of it with me beside it, so I hope that jogged his memory slightly. Yeah, these clouds, I feel like we're being deceived. Some say call it like living in the New Manhattan Project, because the history of weather control and modification is very old. It goes back 100 years. And the Manhattan Project was the atomic bomb secret program that developed the nuclear bomb. And so if you can imagine, there were hundreds of thousands of people employed under the Official Secrets Act. And shortly after the bomb happened, there was a few-year period there where, they had this whole system in place. And that's when they started, I think that's when Tesla died and his patents were taken. And so it's almost like they transferred the nuclear project into this whole climate engineering control weather warfare project. And so what we're also seeing today is, from satellite, you can see how this is just incredible. These are all jet trails, and this is not, to me, normal flight paths, which many have found are military spraying, are not on the flight radar. So, so when you start looking into it, which I did, came across the government talks about geoengineering and their regulation of geoengineering, the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the planetary environment to counteract anthropogenic climate change. So, well, it sounds a bit too good to be true, really. So, in our foyers that Pippa inspired me and helped me to do, we did get some information, and we need a lot more to do in this department. Like I said, she developed her foyers 7 years of asking the right question, and it took her so long because she learned how to frame a question, not be put off. It takes a whole process, months and months of refining down a question to get the right department, to get to the right question, to get the right answer. So she helped speed up this process when we asked a lot of foyers. It's on the directive, so a lot of people asked the question, and we asked the MPs to send it to the relevant department. And we found out that throughout their responses that actually geoengineering is being funded by you to the amount of £3.5 billion in the UK. And it's coming through the Department of the Business of Innovation and Skills to all the other departments. 7 universities are being funded, and the Met Office, which holds the largest supercomputer in the world. And it is, it can register every single cubic meter on the planet. It's registering what's going on in the atmosphere, so they do know what's going on. So also, when I was looking into that paper, there was the Royal Society-backed solar radiation SRMGI, Solar Radiation Management Governance Initiative, which is the Royal Society-backed. I looked into the back of their notes, and these are on Chatham House rules, so there are quotes, but no one quoted saying it. So this really spoke to me. is a quote there. They say, involve the general public because A, they pay for it, present tense. They have the power to stop it. Yay, thank you, Ian. I'm here to, I was very empowered by that, just to they're letting us know that we can stop it. And they say, keep them informed on what geoengineering is for, but don't necessarily ask their permission. So moving on from there, again, we got the history of weather modification. Patents go back to 1917, spraying of atmospheric aerosols. Powder contrail generation patents. In this patent for aerial obscuration or solar radiation management technology, the US Navy is willing to ignore the essentials of contrail science to claim that powder is no different from water vapor. And the classic stratospheric Welsh-back seeding for reduction of global warming names the fingerprint of geoengineering, which is heavy metals of aluminium, barium, and strontium. And a couple more patents. An aerosol dispenser. That's from '79, and one of the HARP patents, which is the High Auroral Active Research Program, which has become, under the auspices of research, has been doing a lot, and that's also now, NextRads are also the next generation of HARP, which are dotted all over the planet. So, and then so you figure, why is it some people can see it? Why is it some people are willing to see that there is something untoward going on and other people are not? Well, you've got the whole New World Order, global control matrix, social engineering, the order out of chaos. We have the whole history of weather warfare, which we now find are bank-run wars for the bankers. And not just the world wars, the war on drugs, the war on crime, the war on terrorism, dividing us through all what's going on in the media these days, divide and conquer, divide and rule, and the problem, reaction, solution, which we'll go into with the climate change and the geoengineering come in to fix the solution, to fix it, to be the solution. So, and then it is really difficult, because the term conspiracy theory is often used to denigrate and discredit inquiry into the veracity of suspected state crimes against democracy. Labeling SCAD research as conspiracy theory is an effective method of preventing ongoing investigations from being reported in the corporate media and keep them outside of broader public scrutiny. So it shows that people are far less willing to examine information that disputes rather than confirms their pre-existing beliefs that can interfere with SCAD's inquiry, especially 9/11. That was another big awakening event for a lot of people. So what we're seeing is not conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy fact. But that kind of derails us, that terminology. So, so the created problem we found originates from the Club of Rome. Maurice Strong, in this book he wrote, was that, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. And this is a really powerful quote because activists that have been going into the climate conferences to try and actually speak to the scientists to really help them see that what we're seeing in the atmosphere originates from this quote. And just an example, a group of 4 people that went to Berlin in a climate conference managed to derail a document that they were trying to get all the scientists to sign, questioning really the science of geoengineering and question the risks, which are very large. One of the reasons was based on this quote, because Max Bliss got this printed out on their printers and handed it out to all the scientists. And, you know, it's effective to look into the history of where this is all coming from. So the creator, fabricator, and proponent of global warming was originally Maurice Strong. I'm just going to click through these because I think we're running out of time. So a lot of quotes there based on talking about the IPCC. And of course, we have the whole round table here connected. The Council on Foreign Relations, there's a quote there which they talk in a meeting saying that indeed they have spent millions confusing the public on global warming. So that's for everyone to hear. And of course, the Club of Rome developed around the same time the United Nations and all the structures that are in place that are now bringing in the Agenda 21. So, yep, some say it's a hoax, and we have the 30,000 scientists saying, signing a petition saying there's no global warming, and how they change the wording from global warming to climate change, and now what we're seeing is global climate disruption. It's just another name that's thrown out there. So, but the BBC is mute on what's happening. So I'm just going to have to click through very quickly now. I think there's many points about global warming being the hoax. And Rosa Corey wrote a great book, Behind the Green Mask. Always great to look into that. Oh, I do? Okay. 4-0. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so again, we're living in the new Manhattan Project. That's what I think is happening. And all these new cloud formations, again, the Met Office is not accepting them as, they're deceiving us, basically. So there's many names for geoengineering, weather modification, weather warfare, in fact, and solar radiation management. Again, the extremes. Or is it the cause of devastating, unprecedented phenomena capable of creating natural disasters? Geoengineering is unsustainable and able to destroy our planet and our lives, in fact. So some of the techniques, space mirrors, reflective aerosols, note the drone. Now, ship tracks are huge also. You'll see from the satellite, not just the contrails, but even bigger are the ship tracks, and they go for 30 miles at a time all over the oceans, and they are definitely cloud seeding there. So you've got the carbon capture, which tends to store carbon dioxide, which is actually needed to grow plants, and in fact, growers push through machines carbon dioxide into their greenhouses to triple the growth of plants. So it's very valuable, and it's expensive for those machines to make. So what they intend to be doing with this, I don't know. Are they going to be, using that to grow something down in their bunkers? I'm not sure. So iron fertilization and geoengineered crops could be one there. So those are techniques, but we're just focusing on the aerosol spraying and the carbon capture. So, so geoengineering is responsible for weather manipulation, which seems to be causing a lot of weather extremes. And who's benefiting from this? Well, you've got your banking, disaster insurances, your banking, utility companies, property developers, drought and flood-resistant crop production, GMOs, weather warfare, weapons. It creates a sky darkening. The global dimming is a phenomena. 20% less sunlight is now available on the planet. Loss of investments through solar power, health problems, rickets is back. Who's benefiting? Again, utility companies, the pharmaceutical industry, nuclear power investors, private healthcare. It creates deforestation. We've got the bee insect decline, tree decline, 12 diseases are now in Europe. The oak is disappearing. The horse chestnut tree is very damaged. So it's very sad. Yeah, so and also the extinction that's happening at a rapid rate on the planet. Again, who's benefiting? Agriculture, GM farming, GM agriculture, depopulation programs. We've got air pollution, again, health problems. Who's benefiting? The health industry, soil contamination. You know, we cannot really, unless you're growing over cover, can't get organic crops because of the fallout. And again, the GM crops, aluminium-resistant seeds. So that's just an overall picture. Again, you know, weather modification is the cloud seeding, and there are companies that do that in America and other countries. Over 150 patents. They range from, you know, many different designs, ranging in complexity, and you know, again, the Welsh-back seeding for reduction of global warming. No, it's a simple approach. So there's no international policy and regulation, which is what the document was for in the beginning. So, but what they're trying to do is get this in place, and once that's in place, it will legitimize it really in a way. So what we're trying to do is really push home to the government that we know about this, we are informed, we do not consent, and we want to ban it because there was an open discussion in the UK Parliament, which that document was based on, and Dr. David King did specify that he believed it should be banned, and so it's not an unreal request. It's been also raised in Parliament already. So the international activities, there's 30 countries practicing weather modification. China does it openly, Russia does it also. It was banned in the NMOD Treaty for war, but it's still allowed in for peaceful purposes, which would be weather modification. And the disadvantages are great. Some moral hazards, I can't really see it very well. But obviously you've got your health problems. The path dependency, once you start, you can't stop. The earth will heat up faster once it stops. So again, just a reminder, this is what we used to have was our blue skies. The trails put it up a haze, and then they usually come in, they spray, you know, they get a lot of chemtrail phenomena as a weather front is moving in, and it almost catches a weather front and uses that to manipulate the weather. Articles talking about geoengineering would turn blue skies whiter, which is what we're seeing. Making that haze sometimes, not even just clouds, but metallic. So our skies are no longer a vibrant blue. And again, the decline of the flora and fauna, the diseases, you know, I mean, we'll see what happens this year, but this is happening all over the planet. You know, when you go walking, there's a lot of damage on the plants these days. And the clouds are getting lower. This was taken by Ariana, the lady who put this PowerPoint together for me. She took that. That's, you know, that's a cloud coming up against the hill there. But it's a fact. There's 1% lower clouds in many instances. But overall 1%, but 5% really in some places. And then Lord Smith was talking about a new kind of rain. Well, this seems to be what's happening with the precipitation that they're doing with the technology, EMFs that they're using. So talking about the rain, these are some of the results of the water tests that I did. A lady called Alex Longman, who was in the project with me in the early days, this was some of her readings. And I'm showing the contrast here between, this was a double-blind tests that we did, sorry. Now, the thing is about the rainwater tests is we've only actually done a few, but we need a lot more, and we need blood tests as well. But this is the only one that's been done in London, so they are very high. The aluminium is very high here, and the iron. And the results that also came back from the government lab was very different. So you can see. Where's the aluminium there? So they told me that, oh, well, you know, I said, why is it so different? And they said, well, they do filter the rainwater. So I was like, okay, well, if you're taking out all the particulars. But the reason why we need more tests, now, on our website, we do have a lot more tests, and you can go there and look at the results. These are exceptionally high. You do really need to collect your rain out in an open space, and this was in London, and we do have to be careful with splashback and such things. But generally speaking, in most of the rainwater tests, which we have about 20 or about at least 20 or 30, there is aluminium, barium, strontium, and all the fingerprint of geoengineering patents are in there. So the fact that there's aluminium in the atmosphere already just bring up the subject of how we're already exposed to a lot of heavy metals and how important this is in regards to our health, because you know, the NHS does put a lot of amalgam fillings in a lot of people's mouths, and I think a lot of us probably already have that. And with all the other aluminium assault we have from cooking and products. The problem is, though, is the synergistic toxicity. How can 1 + 1 = 100? The same thing happens with the GMO foods and the pesticides and the chemicals they use in there. And this was a test done showing that, well, you have the toxicity of mercury, so they take the amount of mercury in salts that kills 1 in 100 mice, but they only take 1% of that, and if you take 1/20th of the amount of lead salt that kills 1 in 100 mice, and you put those two together, you'll get the combination kills all 100 mice. So that has got huge implications for the risks of geoengineering if they're planning on spraying aluminium into the atmosphere of nanoparticles. There has actually been done research by a doctor, which we'll show later, but I just wanted you to see this test that was done regarding
mercury has long been
and the
known
effect
to
on
be
our
a
brain.
potent neurotoxic substance, whether it is inhaled or consumed in the diet as a food contaminant. Over the past 15 years, medical research laboratories have established that dental amalgam tooth fillings are a major contributor to mercury body burden. In 1997, a team of research scientists demonstrated that mercury vapor inhalation by animals produced a molecular lesion in brain protein metabolism, which was similar to a lesion seen in 80% of Alzheimer's diseased brains. Recently completed experiments by scientists at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Medicine now reveal, with direct visual evidence from brain neuron tissue cultures, how mercury ions actually alter the cell membrane structure of developing neurons. To better understand mercury's effect on the brain, let us first illustrate what brain neurons look like and how they grow. In this animation, we see 3 brain neurons growing in a tissue culture, each with a central cell body and numerous neurite processes. At the end of each neurite is a growth cone where structural proteins are assembled to form the cell membrane. 2 principal proteins involved in growth cone function are actin, which is responsible for the pulsating motion seen here, and tubulin, a major structural component of the neurite membrane. During normal cell growth, tubulin molecules link together end-to-end to form microtubules, which surround neurofibrils, another structural protein component of the neuronal axon. Shown here is the neurite of a live neuron isolated from snail brain tissue, displaying linear growth due to growth cone activity. It is important to note that growth cones in all animal species, ranging from snails to humans, have identical structural and behavioral characteristics and use proteins of virtually identical composition. In this experiment, neurons also isolated from snail brain tissue were grown in culture for several days, after which very low concentrations of mercury were added to the culture medium for 20 minutes. Over the next 30 minutes, the neurite membrane underwent rapid degeneration, leaving behind the denuded neurofibrils seen here. In contrast, other heavy metals added at this same concentration, such as aluminum, lead, cadmium, and manganese, did not produce this effect. To understand how mercury causes this degeneration, let us return to our illustration. As mentioned before, tubulin proteins link together during normal cell growth to form the microtubules which support the neurite structure. When mercury ions are introduced into the culture medium, they infiltrate.
Put a drop of mercury there and then drill a little hole underneath it to penetrate the quickly forming aluminum oxides. So let's see what it'll do. See if we can get an aluminum amalgamation going on. This is apparently the reason why it's illegal to bring mercury on an airplane or ship it in an airplane. If there was a spill, it could lead to the destruction of the airplane, and there's actually cases of that.
So I just played that all the way to the end just to hear that, is that there are other videos that show, you know, aluminium and mercury, the way that they combine is really very destructive. So the Sky Guards did present did a presentation to the EU Parliament, so that's another one of the activism that's going on in Europe to show that what's in the test. I mean, we've done rainwater tests, but we haven't actually had it looked at in such detail to show that there's aluminium oxide, barium, also bacteria such as anthrax, pneumonia, 9 chemicals, including that chemical there. 26 heavy metals, 4 molds and fungi, 7 viruses, 2 cancers, 2 vaccines, 2 sedatives, E. coli, Salmonella, thorium, and obviously the health effects. So that was presented to the EU Parliament. And again, the health effects of nanoparticles, which are a problem, the body just really has a hard time dealing with them and with the resulting diseases. So Dr. Russell Baylock, David Keith said there's been no studies done, but there have been studies, and there are many doctors speaking out about it. And Dr. Russell Baylock is one saying that, I pray that the pilots who are spraying this dangerous substance fully understand that they are destroying the life and health of their families as well. This is also true for our political officials. Once the soil, plants, and water sources are heavily contaminated, there will be no way to reverse the damage that has been done. So he's talking about how the because he's done studies into aluminium, mercury, that the nanoparticulates go through the blood-brain barrier and go directly into our system. And we absorb them. There are ways to detox heavy metals, so I advise looking into that. And again, sometimes you don't see clouds, you just see a haze. It's just no longer that bright, vibrant blue. And sometimes we forget, but it used to be a lot bluer. So it appears that, actually another activist, researcher, Clifford Carnicom, another great website to do your research on, did identify the 7 agendas of military-industrial intelligence complex, which a lady called Elena Freeland then wrote a book called Chemtrails, HARP, and the full spectrum dominance. And so weather and environmental modification, economic, biological, and environmental warfare, just to show you the 7 agendas. You've got your weather environmental modification, electromagnetic operations, you've got your HARP and your NEXRADs, military operations, biological operations, geophysical operations, and intelligence surveillance of everything and everyone, the C4, command, control, communications, and computers, which is the larger net that's coming around us, invisible to some, and ultimately detection of exotic propulsion systems. But you could call it, well, as it is such a large military agenda that's going on, perhaps, this is all just collateral damage. And the bigger program is this huge military-industrial intelligence complex. This is just like an effect of that going on, and we're happening to be witnessing and suffering the consequences of its fallout. So, the military operations go all the way out to space, and when, I guess I need to move on a bit here. So, for years they've been putting chemicals in the atmosphere. Alfred Weber did a great interview with Lorraine Murray talking about how when Dennis Kucinich put in the act to ban chemtrails, they were talking about this whole chemical, the chemicals that they'd put in for the space program. So it's been going on a long time. And then you've got the Owning the Weather 2025 military document. The solution, the weather control problem involves networked miniature balloons, feeding and receiving. Oh, right, so this was another abstract from another paper, Operational Defenses through Weather Control 2030, saying, the future of nanotechnology will enable creation of stratus cloud formations to defeat DEW and optically targeted attacks on United States assets. So it's just talking about another advance into the nano particular, and they're still talking about it. One of the major drawbacks to optical or directed energy systems is the inability to penetrate clouds or dense fog. Advances in technology are beginning to bring weather phenomena under our control. Greatly increased computing power and micronized delivery systems will allow us to create specific perturbations in local atmospheric conditions. So they're really wanting to control the weather. These are from their documents showing again their intentions and the treaty issues that they are well aware of. So just to go into the HARP, electromagnetic operations. This is from a slideshow from Albert Weber. HARP, chemtrails, weapons of mass destruction, exposing a spiritual mass mind control and planetary assault. Showing how the HARP uses the atmospheric plasma created by aerosol spraying as plasma weapons, carried medium and force multiplier for its space-based component, bioweapons and mind control weapon systems against the human population. So that's what's going on there. I'm sure actually a lot of us are very aware of that, but just moving through. The next generation of HARP is the NEXRADs, which are now actually located around the power plants, close to the power plants. And this shows how, if you can see carefully, you've got some emanations of radar coming out here. And what happens is when this happens, when you see these bursts coming out on the radar maps, you'll also see the HARP signatures in the clouds. And this is very, very heavy precipitation. So when we were talking about the new rain, you know, this is how actually these nanoparticulates are actually creating a haze, and there's not a lot of natural rainfall anymore, but they are actually using these radars, and they're emitting a lot of radar, and that actually is the electromagnetic frequencies that mix with the heavy metals and causes the rain fallout. One example was when we were recording and looking into the floods that happened a couple of years ago. There's a whole problem there, but it showed how when you looked, you could see that the floods were actually created by these radar. And you've got the planetary geophysical operations, looking at the HARP frequency around that time of the Fukushima disaster. So HARP is capable of doing this, and others are engaging, this quote, even in an eco-type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. What Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism, so there are some people benefiting off of this, so the whole weather derivatives issue, you know, you can manipulate the weather to make money off the stock market. So also here, your weather environmental warfare, which is the military-based. Quote from futurist Thomas Frey, he who owns the weather will control the world. And some more examples of very unnatural weather formations. Another activist, Scott Stevens, who's a meteorologist, a weatherman, what used to be in the media. I did ask him if this was natural, and he said this is completely unnatural, these angular formations. And again, the HARP frequencies that come from these NEXRAD and HARP facilities. You see the scalar waves coming out. So again, just to highlight the full spectrum dominance intention of the military, which involves all the intelligence and surveillance which these electromagnetic ionizing heavy metals are making a plasma in our atmosphere, making our atmosphere like a battery, conductive for their agenda here. So we eventually go down to the nanoparticulates that David Keith was talking about. There's been many biological, chemical operations going on, highlighted in the media just recently. You know, Joni Mitchell is suffering from Magellan's disease. So it's good that it's highlighting it. We hope that she gets well. But all of these nanofibers are said to be present in some of the test results. So where this is going is deep down the rabbit hole. And this is the hard part to look at. And so nanotechnology, this is just from you know, information that's out there, and the pitfalls being they can get into the body through the skin, lungs, and digestive system, creating free radicals, cell damage. And once they're in the blood system, they cross the blood-brain barrier. Most dangerous nano application used for military purposes is the nanobomb. The nuclear bomb was the mother of all bombs, and the nano bomb is now the father of all bombs. Russia has one, I think, probably America has one too, so that's like nightmare. And the thing about the nanobots is that they do self-replicate, and they're a big threat, because once they're in the atmosphere, where's the turn-off switch? And there's also been, here we go, a problem with, there's this grey goo that comes out of it, and also, I also mentioned black goo, because that's an element that's hard to go into right now, but just to mention it, is part of the nanotechnology, so I recommend that you look into that, but I can't really cover it here today. So is it good or bad? And well, are there regulations? And there's no regulations on nanotechnology also. And the problem with the nanotechnology, it's already in our food, in our clothes, in our cosmetics, and in the atmosphere. When it comes to testing the air samples, actually, this goes through. It's so small, there are hardly any regular, government testing that shows these up in the atmosphere, so it's going completely beneath the radar. And again, here we have the nanobomb that is, not many people realize this, but it's big technology. And then where else does it take us to? There's basically to transhumanism, which seems like a big jump, but it's not. It's again, referring back to the Kali Yuga, which is the Iron Age. We're coming out of the Iron Age, but we're being engulfed with all this metal. And if you think of these nanoparticulates self-replicating in our body, which we probably all have, some of us emit them, but we're being literally turned into possibly, our DNA is possibly being damaged here, and we're incorporating robotics into our body. Now, this guy was at the Berlin Climate Conference, and he said there are going to be catastrophic weather events. And he also thinks that the human form is inadequate. So just to say that, how do they know there's going to be catastrophic weather events? He was saying this year, 2015, and funnily enough, there is a big climate conference happening in Paris where Obama and many other world leaders will be there to sign a climate change document which will bring in and legitimize the 500 new weather laws that they're bringing in through the Agenda 21 program to further net us. And transhumanists such as Jamai, he was at the climate conference. And I just don't understand what transhumanism, if you're just trying to figure this out, has got to do with climate engineering. So, but obviously there's a connection. The look on his face and his whole demeanor is not happy looking. But again, the transhumanist agenda and the public pushback, which is what we've been trying to do. Inspiration, Rachel Carson, who stopped the DDT through her very, very thorough work. And that's what we intend to do also, is just put our pen against the poison. We do encourage you, if you could, our website is Chemtrails Project UK, cpuk.org. And what we have also got is the United Atmospheric Preservation Act, which is the law. A law needs to be brought into place to protect us. And it was written by Michael Castle, and we converted it into, to English law. And it's on our website. And an activist that I'm going to Paris with I'm going to Paris to a climate conference with another group of activists, which is where we're hoping to face these scientists and change their attitude and have them look at this whole issue from our perspective. She said, how do the elite get what they want? With documents and signatures. And that's what we're going for. So actually, I have a GoFundMe together which is on my website, to help me get there, to try and push this forward. Any support would be gratefully accepted. And again, we do encourage everyone to take action on these issues. That was the banner made by Ariana. Geoengineering is said to be a plan B, in case we can't reduce the emissions, but there is no planet B, and there certainly isn't a plan B. We just need to not do it and slowly recover from the damage we've done. These are our seeds, flyers. It's a lot of information for people. Sometimes just handing them the information to slowly look at helps. And again, I guess I have to finish. It's way too short, but again, getting the bigger picture. We are moving towards the light, and there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And just to make the connection again between the scientists at CERN and CERN itself, that CERN can generate a magnetic field more than 100,000 times more powerful than Earth. So this is what we're dealing with. It is the 11th hour, and I really encourage everyone to, as an example, this is the first time I've got up and talked, but I think that in all these areas, I think we really need to go into our communities. And if you want to contact me to help, there are actually a few people that have got some great ideas, but there's been no activism in England for a long, long time, and I really think it's time that we get this kind of information out. I hope that our website can help. There's a lot of other websites out there doing it. I just want to thank a lot of the authors and books that have been written, a lot of activists and researchers, and these are the websites that we highly recommend you can get all this information from for your own research. And so I was going to hopefully go into the directive, but that'll have to be for another time. We go through all of those points. I highly recommend you go there. All the links it's actually should have done really a whole PowerPoint on the directive itself, because it actually goes through the whole subject in a very smooth, succinct, well-documented way. 450 MPs have this document sent by many people. We did send a petition to Parliament, and it's only the beginning. So if you can help support in any way you can through your own activism, helping join other people, I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you, Olga.
Yeah, our Chemtrails Project UK, cpuk.org is another form to contact us. So
thank you.
Thanks.
And well done. Again, I didn't want to say anything before, so I didn't want to put you under any pressure, but well done on our first public presentation. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's interesting how it's always the same players, isn't it? Maurice Strong. Do a little bit of, if you haven't come across the name before, do a little bit of research into Maurice Strong, his relationship with Mikhail Gorbachev. Maurice Strong is a nasty, nasty piece of work. I think I've got a feeling he's actually banned from setting foot in the United States. So that's how bad it is. I think he lives in China, I think, or somewhere in the Far East right now. But Maurice Strong is also one of the authors, Mikhail Gorbachev being the other, of Agenda 21, which of course was adopted by the UN at the Rio conference in 1992. Sometimes I have this sort of perverse vision that there's some kind of universal law out there that says that if another species wants to actually take over a planet, they can't do it unless the existing population effectively allow them to do so. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean they do it totally overtly, or they don't have to put it on the front pages of the national media what they're doing, but they have to explain, they have to put out there what it is they're doing piece by piece, piece by piece. And of course, once we, the collective we, don't respond or don't react, that's effectively a mandate for them to continue with their agenda. Now that may be a perverse vision, but it actually seems to be what's manifesting here. We're going through terraforming, because that's what this is, terraforming. You know, the unconventional gas agenda is terraforming. You saw on the video last night the gas vents, the methane gas vents. Consider the possibility that the agenda behind unconventional gas isn't so much the gas as venting the methane. You know, venting the methane on the basis that it's actually just a byproduct. It's just a necessary part of the process. But that is what is doing the damage. And those vents that you saw last night in the documentary, when you consider the fact that they're literally every kilometre or so, they're not flares, they're just methane vents. It's part of the whole terraforming process. So I think, I know we, to all intents and purposes, we are the converted. But it's now a question of taking that conversion to the next level. And you know, what is so wonderful is to see, you know, Olga, she said, you know, a parent who's picked up on a cause here and against enormous social opposition, because that is the case here. Because the climate, well, the geoengineering is so visible, and that's why it's so demonized. Anybody who dares mention it, I mean, are you converted yet, Matt? We'll have a discussion later. But you know, it is arguably the most visible aspect of the terraforming, and yet the most denied. You know, so it has to be acknowledged. The full credit to Olga and the others who are out there on point. And Olga knows that, you know, it's my opinion that the geoengineering community has been deliberately infiltrated to try and keep what they're doing corralled and suppressed. Because when people do see it, then you know, they might just it might just trigger their curiosity into what else is going on. So now we're going to take lunch. I'm pleased to say that I've just got the nod that our next speaker is here. So we're going to take lunch, and after lunch we continue this theme of DNA manipulation. And Dr. Graham Downing is going to be sharing his research into the role that vaccines are playing in modifying our DNA.